Speaking as a veteran myself, I get asked really strange questions and I get subjected to a lot of strange comments and criticisms from time to time. And for the most part, I feel like I'm just answering the same ones over and over again. There's one particular topic that I'm seeing floating around TikTok, especially Mill Talk lately, and well, I thought I'd give my thoughts on the matter. Hello everyone, it's your girl Egodram with yet another art-ish video, but today I want to talk about something serious, and lately there has been a lot of talk and concerns about Selective Service, new legislation therein, and speculation of a possible coming draft due to current international events being what they are in a particular region of the Earth. There are many completely valid criticisms to make and questions that need to be asked about the institution of the United States military, public perspectives and attitudes about it, as well as current and past actions it has taken and might possibly take in the near future. Now, theoretically, in the United States, military service is voluntary. It is a contract job, meaning once you get your ASVAB score and pass the initial round of testing and examinations at MEPS, and then you sign that contract, no, you cannot just quit. Not without your family getting put on a watch list. There's simply no nice way to put it. But yeah, you can't just walk away. You're in. And like thousands upon thousands of Americans who lost their jobs and some of whom lost their homes after the 2008 housing crisis, your humble narrator here, after losing my job and almost losing my apartment, was convinced to sign a 4-year enlistment contract with the United States Army as a communications technician. My MOS was 25 November, basically a nodal network operator, and I was told that since it was a tech job and I would be learning IT skills, it almost guaranteed me a profitable and meaningful career in a tech industry, a background in which I actually had no familiarity with the time, and a job I later eventually accepted I was actually terrible at. It's a desk job, they told me. And since females are officially forbidden from serving in quote-unquote combat roles anyway, your odds of deploying are practically nil, they told me. Little did I know that less than a year into my military career, if I could even really accurately call it that, my ass was on a plane. In 2010, I deployed with the 40th Expeditionary Signal Battalion Bravo Company, in which my initial station, if you want to call it that, was a place called Fob Warhorse, and I was eventually brought to another place not terribly far away called Joint Base Balad, where the job I was actually sent there to do wasn't even the one that I was trained for. Basically, imagine a Geek Squad girl with a really large gun. As soon as the shock of realizing just how badly my dumbass got lied to finally started to wear off, I kind of started picturing scenarios in my head of the kind of things you typically see in movies like Hurt Locker or Black Hawk Down, which, thankfully, in my experience, never came to fruition. What they also don't tell you is that just because you're not in a combat-related MOS doesn't necessarily mean that shit won't find you eventually, as well as, well, other heinous experiences that I went through that I've already talked about in other videos. Imagine an entire generation of young people, teenagers and early 20-somethings, raised by that generation of veterans, probably not exactly having the best opinion of the U.S. military right now, and quite frankly, I don't blame them. I am not at all the least bit surprised that U.S. military recruitment levels are supposedly at an all-time historic low. And to emphasize, the following is speculation on my part, that is why I think we're starting to see a wave of discussion, concern, and coming legislation about selective service, which would, if ever acted upon, essentially force males in the United States between the ages of 18 and 26 to serve in the next war that they may not necessarily like or agree with. And yes, historically, the U.S. Selective Service, aka draft, has focused exclusively on young males. But that's not blue-haired Braley's fault. That's actually this guy's fault. This fine specimen of the system is U.S. District Court Judge Dudley Bonsall, whom in 1968 rather flippantly shot down a federal lawsuit brought forth by a university student who claimed that since women were allowed to become service members and do certain jobs in the U.S. military, they should also be subject to selective service. Judge Bonsall obviously disagreed, to which he nearly immediately retorted, quote, "In providing for involuntary service for men and voluntary service for women, Congress followed the teachings of history that if a nation were to survive, men must provide the first line of defense while women kept the home fires burning." And concluding his retort based on the fact that women are capable of volunteering for military service and being soldiers, he concluded his argument, and I quote, "The distinction between men and women with respect to service in the armed forces is not arbitrary, unreasonable, or capricious." Unquote. What a novel concept. A hastily made decision by an old white dude from our grandfather's time having unpopular and controversial after effects some decades later. And over the course of those following decades, this concept has been challenged in our court system multiple times, and socially, it's been argued that if it doesn't include absolutely goddamn everyone, then it shouldn't exist at all. Which segues into my next train of thought concerning a possible U.S. military draft. Not everyone should be in the military, voluntarily or otherwise. Some people simply do not have the temperament for it, are not capable of it, and in a situation where they clearly don't want to be there, especially an entire younger generation that has made it clear that they're not exactly very happy with the status quo right now, I don't think anything good could possibly come of forcing these people to participate in a system they don't like, in activities they abhor and don't agree with. In fact, that seems like a great way. That seems like the perfect decision to hasten one's appointment with the old French headache, if you history buffs out there catch my meaning. Also, during and after Vietnam, it was observed and concluded that draftees are really, really bad for troop morale. Since the process of the draft in Vietnam was often rushed, there was much more emphasis on combat preparedness and combat training than there was on troop morale and discipline. Lack of proper military discipline is how we get shit like My Lai and Abu Ghraib. Google those two terms, those two incidents, greatly at the risk of your own personal sanity. They're heinous. And lack of enforcement of proper military discipline is how we get situations like... Have you ever heard of a documentary called The Invisible War? Also, if you're going to Google that one, you do so greatly at the risk of your own sanity. It's also heinous. So now that I've ranted and raved regarding some of my opinions on the U.S. military draft and selective service, why is this topic coming up on the internet lately? Meet House Resolution 8070, which, if signed into law, would make registration for young males into selective service automatic once you hit 18. Between 18 to 26, if you are currently between those ages. You have no say in the matter. They're just going to go ahead and do it. And, as we previously discussed in a certain court ruling from 1968, and in the coming decades, it has no provisions for requiring young women to sign up for selective service. But don't worry. Folks are challenging that. Again. And again, and again, like they have many times before. But this time, yeah, they're totally doing it again. Now, in theory, if you have to keep a draft, like I said, it should include everyone. In theory, that shouldn't bother me. But the part about that does bother me isn't so much, okay, it's partly, but not all of the fact that it's still forcing people to participate in a system they don't like. I get the distinct feeling that this challenge, by including young women, isn't about fairness, but about gambling with the lives of American citizens. I get the very distinct impression that they think so little of our collective willpower that they really, really don't see any possible negative consequences to this. They see us as pawns and not people. I am speculating here, but I think the real reason why they are trying to tack on women into selective service isn't for the sake of fairness, but for the sake of possibly trying to kill this bill by putting human beings on the table like poker chips. I have always felt, even while I was in the military, that the draft was a terrible idea. For real, don't we already have the largest and best-funded voluntary force ever in human history, I think? Why do we really need this? What's the real end game here? And the following is speculation on my part yet again, but given low recruitment numbers, I would not be the least bit surprised if things hit the fan with current events overseas as they are. They're concerned about not having enough meat to throw into the grinder. So of course they can't find willing people to join up, especially young people who know full well from the examples of their parents and grandparents that we are just going to be left on the street when we get home. They look left and right for any possible excuse to scrap our benefits as soon as we hang up our uniforms and return home, but goddamn do we make great photo ops. I am hard-pressed to think of anything more hypocritical than forcing unwilling people to fight for quote-unquote freedom. But hey, if lying to the poor and destroying their own minds and bodies boosts Raytheon and General Dynamics stock, then what should they care? Look, I'm not anti-military, okay? Every country has the right to defend themselves, in my opinion. Hell, under the right circumstances, I wouldn't even be anti-war. But that bar is pretty high. But I would really rather that this society is one worth going through all that expense and effort to defend, instead of one that just ignores its own people and leaves them on the street. If an institution were really, truly, honestly as virtuous as they claim to be and worthy of respect and admiration, then they wouldn't lie to people. This mixed media painting that you've been watching me work on throughout this whole video, I've decided to title it after a book that I've been reading and I'm currently nearly complete, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to better understand the U.S. military-industrial complex. Sacred Soldier, a book by U.S. military veteran and journalist Robert F. Keeler. If you want to get a better understanding about how the skewed view of our military and our recruitment practices and public perceptions and such, and also includes a chapter on the draft, I cannot recommend this book enough. With additional historical information that I honestly did not know until very recently reading this book, everything in it is pretty much what I have been saying since I ETS'd in 2013. But as I've said multiple times throughout this video, this is all just my speculation and opinion at this point. Let's hope opinion doesn't become reality, yeah?